an additional step and actually bring Raul Castro here to Miami to face justice? I mean, that's the question. It's not clear whether they would do that or whether they would use this indictment as a pressure point in order to enact regime change in Cuba. Just a few moments ago, the indictment was announced. Sources had told CBS News that this was going to happen today. And just a few moments ago, I heard cheering from a crowd of Cuban Americans that's standing outside the Freedom Tower here in Miami, where that press conference is set to be held. Now, this indictment all has to do with the shoot down of 2 humanitarian planes, the humanitarian planes part of Brothers to the Rescue. This was a group that went out into the Florida Straits, went out into international waters, and helped Cubans who were making their way from the communist island looking for freedom, and they were making their way here to Miami. So they had a fleet of about 10 planes that would go out and help Cubans who were in distress. They also participated in some pro-democracy missions, which included dropping leaflets on the communist island. Back in 1996, 2 of their planes were shot down. There was a 3rd plane that was not shot down, and 4 people died. That includes 3 U.S. citizens and 1 U.S. resident. The Cuban American community here in Miami has for decades been calling for change in Cuba, and for the past 3 decades calling for justice for those 4 men who were killed on that day. And as I mentioned just moments ago, when that indictment was announced, we heard cheering outside of the Freedom Tower. We're still waiting to hear from a number of speakers that are set to list off what the charges are going to be and just give us a sense of what else is in this indictment.
All right, Christian Benavides, as we hear word of the cheers that likely come from generations of families who remember. Thank you so much. Turning now to CBS News Intelligence and National Security reporter Olivia Gasses. Olivia, we're still watching that podium to see who steps forward there, but Secretary of State Marco Rubio addressed the Cuban people in a video message earlier. What was the message?
That's right. Well, this was the first time that Rubio, who himself is the son of Cuban immigrants, spoke directly to the Cuban people as Secretary of State. And he chose to do it in Spanish and on the day that Cuba marks its independence from Spain and U.S. occupation. It was a sharp salvo against the government, as he has been doing. He said he blamed the government as the reason that the Cuban people have no electricity, no food, no fuel. He pointed to this business conglomerate run by the Cuban military, Gaesa, which controls most of the Cuban economy, as the main obstacle standing between the Cuban people and a better future, both domestically and in relation to the United States. And he reiterated this offer that the U.S. has been dangling of $100 million in humanitarian aid to be delivered directly to the Cuban people through Catholic charities. But officials that we've spoken to say that money hasn't yet moved. Negotiations are still continuing. Of course, Rubio's message sought to cast the U.S. and this administration in a sort of cooperative, benevolent light, but it's absolutely worth noting that Cuba's primary energy lifeline, which were these oil deliveries that came directly from Venezuela, evaporated virtually overnight after the U.S. removed Nicolas Maduro from power earlier this year. That, along with these punishing sanctions that the U.S. has levied on Cuban officials and institutions, has been a significant factor in pushing Cuba into one of the worst humanitarian and economic crises that it's seen in decades, Reed.
Such an inflection point. I used to live in Miami. I've covered this issue deeply, and I would imagine that the reaction will be resoundingly positive there in Miami if we hear more indictments of other Cuban officials. What are you hearing about that?
That's right. Well, I think that we are just learning what we had been reporting earlier, that the Justice Department is expected to unveil, or has unveiled now, an indictment of Cuba's 94-year-old former leader and defense minister Raúl Castro with what appear to be 5 others on charges that we believe will be related to the shoot down, as Christian was telling you, of humanitarian planes in 1996. So you've heard this administration call the Cuban government corrupt. You've heard them call it incompetent, and now they are also seeking to label it as criminal with this federal indictment. And Reed, these legal moves are following a number of these other screw-tightening measures that this administration has reached for, including, again, the fresh sanctions. We got another swath on Monday against top military and intelligence officials. And at the same time, trying to keep a diplomatic track alive and progressing. Last week, dispatching the CIA director to meet with senior officials in Havana. And again, this humanitarian relief package that appears to be tied to the same demand that this administration has had, that the government in Cuba make requisite political changes that make it more palatable to the U.S. The question, of course, is whether those changes actually happen or whether those in power in Cuba really buckle down to outlast even more crushing American pressure.
Yeah, and we know this is a major voting bloc, and they are political, and they are politically active. You know, I've stood on the waters there, the shoreline of Miami. I've seen people arrive from Cuba who got into Miami through the wet foot, dry foot policy, and they all get off those boats, and they all say, Fidel Castro, Raul Castro destroyed our families' businesses. In what sense is this indictment against Raul Castro also symbolic, and the Cuban people for generations feeling like this is perhaps some comeuppance for Fidel Castro and the Castro regime at large?
Absolutely. It is symbolic insofar as Raul Castro, as we've pointed out, is 94 years old. Even though he's not currently in power, he still wields an enormous amount of influence in Cuban politics. And Reed, we should say that the Cuban government has been trying to strenuously deny that it poses an active military threat to the United States. Its officials have said that it is not an aggressor, that it is combating outsized influence from the United States and doesn't harbor any threat. This has come as there's been sorry, my phone is going off here.
Listen, you're a reporter. Your sources are calling you. We understand, friend. It's okay.
Sorry about that. This is coming as we've heard reports of drones that the Cuban government has accumulated, and whether those would be a factor should there be an external military confrontation. Now, we do not sense that one is imminent, but it has become more of a possibility as, again, the United States has pointed to the need for the government to demonstrate that it is willing to change in order to get to a more cooperative relationship, is what we understood the CIA director to have relayed to senior officials there. That the U.S. pointing to what they see as a productive relationship now in Venezuela, wants to see a different set of leadership at the top and wants to engage economically to the extent that is possible, but it won't be possible with the interlocutors that it currently has there.
All right, Olivia, thank you so much. We likely will be checking back into you as news breaks throughout this hour. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you. Let's go back to Miami and CBS News correspondent Christian Benavides there. You know, I'm always fascinated in covering this story. I remember also standing at a prominent cathedral, I know you'll know the name of it, that pays tribute to those who came through rough waters to come to the shores of the United States. If you can capture this moment from the perspective of the mothers and fathers, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, and what the significance of this is, not only is this indictment connected to the 1996 downing of planes, but this has also got to be symbolic for so many families who say they suffered under the Castro regime, lost their businesses, lost their homes, and many of them died.
Reed, absolutely. I mean, you have to think about the families that had their businesses seized and that had to live through this brutal authoritarian regime that is still in power. Now, it's important to note that Cuba is at one of its weakest, if not the weakest moment that it has ever been. So people here in South Florida see what's happening on the island. They do see it. They see their family members suffering through the blackout, suffering through the lack of food and through those brutal conditions. But overwhelmingly, the belief here is that change may be around the corner for so many Cuban Americans who live here in South Florida. I spoke to Jose Basulto, who was on the third plane. I mentioned, you know, these humanitarian planes that are at the center of this indictment. Two of them were shut down. Jose Basulto was on the third plane, and he watched his friends be killed on international waters by the Cuban regime. And what he told me was that he feels that change in Cuba is closer than it ever has been before in the past. And I'll tell you, there's a small crowd that's right outside the Freedom Tower, and every so often we hear them cheering. I don't know what they're watching, but we hear them cheering, and
right.
We hear the joy from so many Cuban Americans who are here in South Florida. After seeing what happened in Venezuela, one thing that I would caution is that in Venezuela, you have Delcy Rodriguez, who is still part of the Maduro regime that is in power there, though they are collaborating with the United States. Here, when you talk to Cuban Americans, they'll tell you directly that they do not want to see anyone from the regime still in power. And it is so difficult to find someone within the Cuban regime that could hold a position similar to Delcy, because most of the opposition lives here in Miami because they were either imprisoned in Cuba or had to flee from the communist island. So it is truly remarkable to hear the hope that so many Cuban Americans here have. They are ready for this change. They have been waiting for change in Cuba for decades, and they're seeing the humanitarian crisis that has been unfolding on the island, and they've been watching what the administration has been doing and hoping that they would be able to enact some sort of regime change.
I'm so jealous that you're there to get to record this story in real time. I think of the inscription at the base of the Statue of Liberty about huddled masses yearning to be free. That really typifies and captures the spirit of so many Cuban Americans there, likely toasting themselves with some Café Versailles cafecito today. Nice to talk to you. As soon as we see somebody at that podium, we'll bring it to you. Christian Benavides, excellent reporting as always. All right, so we're also getting granular here. We're looking at what's in that indictment. So let's go live to CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen. You're starting to dig into it and see what the line items are. What are you seeing so far?
Yeah, that's right, Reed. We are waiting on the full indictment to be unsealed, but as these kind of trickle of court filings have come in, we do have an initial set and read on what the charges are alleged against former Cuban leader Raúl Castro. The first charge, as Christian has spoken about in depth here, is conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals. That is just a singular count. There are 2 counts of a destruction of aircraft, as Christian just pointed out. 2 of those brothers to the rescue planes were shot down in the 1990s, carrying U.S. citizens and a U.S. resident, and that leads to the final charge, which is 4 counts of murder. And as Christian just pointed out, it was 3 U.S. citizens who were on board those planes attempting to rescue Cubans who were fleeing the island, and there was 1 U.S. resident who was also killed. We are waiting on a full unsealing of this indictment, I would assume, just given how the Department of Justice typically plays things out. It could come at any moment as we await this presser, or meanwhile, while Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and other law enforcement heads are set to be discussing this in depth. And I think one moment of clarity that we will get, just like the Nicolas Maduro indictment, was how deeply involved can the United States allege the involvement went from the top down of the government. As we know, in a similar comparison, it's likely that they're going to allege that simply because he's the head, former head of the country, that he had some direct knowledge of the order or directly ordered the shooting down of these planes. How granular can the United States get in that indictment? Do they have potential witnesses or documentation to back up these charges? And we will certainly find out more in a couple of moments on specifics.
I know you'll have it. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And stay with us on CBS News 24/7. This is a historic moment in the history of Cubans and Cuban Americans. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We're back after the break.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
We don't want to accept that there's evil that walks amongst us, but it does. You know how when you meet somebody, you can't put your finger on it, but something's not right?
You never know what anybody is capable of.
I am a serial killer who's only killed once.
Did you think when this goes public, this town's gonna be shocked?
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with a 30-year-old cold case, it seems like there's not a lot of hope.
We knew there was a monster out there and we were going to find him and get him.
Look at him just coming around the corner like that.
We started tracking the area.
When did this accident scene become a crime scene?
Police!
You called him a lying liar who lies about lying.
Do you know why we're stopping you today?
What makes you so sure that you stabbed your sister while you were sleepwalking?
I never got a chance to see her one last time.
Such injustice. I can't believe they did this to her.
But no matter how hard it gets, never give up.
I'm Natalie Morales with 48 Hours. Did you have anything to do with Joanna Hunter's death?
This is a family that just wants justice.
I'm Tony DeCopel from a region at war tonight.
To tell the story,
Hello up there.
you have to be there, seeing it firsthand.
I'm Tony, I work for CBS.
Can you clarify what this war is about? How do you avoid this becoming a death trap?
This war only seems to be accelerating.
The CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel.
This is a story we're watching in breaking news fashion, and we will throughout this hour. Live to Miami, where the Justice Department unveiled criminal charges against former Cuban President Raúl Castro related to Cuba's 1996 shoot-down of humanitarian planes. We are awaiting for officials to take to that podium in Miami. As soon as we see it, you'll see it right here on CBS News 24/7. Meanwhile, in Connecticut, President Donald Trump just wrapped up a commencement address to graduates at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. The president taking this opportunity to really pump up the military in the speech. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman is inside that stadium for today's ceremonies. Katrina, what did the president have to say there? Especially, we're curious about Iran.
Reed, the president talked about building up the U.S. military strength. About Iran specifically, he commented, do we go finish it up, or are they going to sign a document? So this is still a real question mark, Reed. He also touted the Coast Guard's role in some of these military operations, though. He talked about how they helped track down an Iranian oil tanker. He also talked about their role in capturing Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. Something else he brought up was an investment in icebreakers. He says this is something Russia has 48 of, and we only have one very old one. But soon we're going to have a big fleet, he says, and they will be operating them. These now ensigns, formerly cadets, who are now graduating behind me. He also had some words of advice for the graduates. He told them to never give up. He said, always push forward, no matter how terrible the storm. Make your adversary quit first, in what could be a timely comment by him. He also said you have to think big for greatness. He told them to always work hard. He said that is how you succeed, and talked about how hard he works. And he also told them to be relentless, strong, and brave, Reed.
Well, Katrina Kaufman, we appreciate that update. And also, we see all of those cadets there behind you. We so very much extend so many exciting congratulations to them. Thank you, Katrina. Now this.
I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrein in Tel Aviv. I did get the call through, though. I have called and conceded the race. We've been honorable the whole time, and we're going to stay that way.
The winner of the race tonight is not so much Ed Galrein. I'll come back to that. But it's the Republicans of Kentucky Congressional District 4 and their families who I will be a champion for in Washington. Yeah. I want to thank a few folks, and bear with me, I'll keep this short.
All right, CBS News projects Ed Gallrein defeats incumbent Congressman Thomas Massie in Kentucky, the latest Republican to lose a primary to a Trump-backed challenger. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro shows us what drove voters to dump a sitting congressman.
The race in Kentucky's 4th congressional district is the most expensive primary so far in U.S. history, and it really revolved around President Trump. Congressman Thomas Massie, a Republican who has represented that northern Kentucky district since 2012, has voted with the president and his party nearly all of the time. But it was those times where he did not that really put him in the political crosshairs of President Trump in recent months. Massie voted against the president's tax and spending bill that he pushed through last summer, known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. He has voted to limit President Trump's military powers when it comes to his war in Iran, and he was part of a bipartisan group of lawmakers to push for the Epstein files to be released, and that matter has frustrated President Trump several times throughout his second term. But it was the Trump team's argument that was proven right on Tuesday night as Massie lost to the president's endorsed challenger, Navy SEAL veteran Ed Gallrein, who has pledged to be a loyalist to President Trump and his agenda. There was also an influx of outside money that came into this Republican primary, about $32 million, a good amount of that being pro-Israel groups that have been frustrated with Massie for voting against funding to Israel. Massie has said he is against funding of any kind to any country outside of the United States. But it shows that if you are a Republican politician who has crossed President Trump in any way and he's paying attention to your race, he's endorsed a challenger to you, it's unlikely you will make it through a primary. And we may see all of that play out soon in the Texas Senate Republican runoff, as President Trump has endorsed Attorney General Ken Paxton in that race over the incumbent Senator John Cornyn. Back to you.
All right, thank you for that update. Meanwhile, in battleground Georgia, a state that saw record-breaking early voting numbers ahead of yesterday's primary election, one of the victory speeches went a little bit like this. Watch.
I am a fighter. And I could not rest knowing that people across this state needed someone to stand in the gap and fight on their behalf. And Georgians sent a clear message tonight that they want a fighter. Someone who will stand up to Donald Trump in all of the chaos. And let's be clear, the only people Burt Jones and Rick Jackson have fought for are themselves. Their campaigns are not about Georgians. They are not waking up every single day thinking about the challenges that our families are facing across this state and how to take them on. And they certainly do not see Donald Trump as someone to stand up to.
That is former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms winning the Democratic nomination for Georgia governor and putting potential challengers on notice. Bottoms faces either Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones or billionaire healthcare executive Rick Jackson in November. Those two squaring off again June 16th. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry picks up the story from Georgia.
A lot of interesting headlines coming out of the state of Georgia following Tuesday's primary. Let's start with the gubernatorial races. On the Democrat side, the former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms running away as she is projected to become the Democratic nominee that will run for governor come November. For a long period of time leading up until Tuesday, many viewed her as the walkaway favorite, but still some skeptics out there didn't realize that she would have such a sizable advantage in comparison to the rest of the others that were running on the Democratic side of this ticket. On the Republican side, very interesting, that race is going into a runoff between the current Republican Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and the healthcare billionaire Rick Jackson, both of whom have touted moving forward with conservative agendas, but also have been throwing jabs at one another for the last several weeks. And so it'll be incredibly interesting to see what happens moving forward, especially the fact that the current lieutenant governor has the endorsement of President Trump. In the Senate, we know that the Democrat, Jon Ossoff, is running unopposed. But on the Republican side, what we viewed as a three-man race is now down to two, and that is between current Republican Congressman Mike Collins and the outsider, so to speak, the former Tennessee Volunteer football coach Derek Dooley, who has had the support of the current Republican governor Brian Kemp. Kemp says that it is an outsider's perspective that will be needed in order to win not only this primary, but also beat Jon Ossoff in November because of having the outsider's perspective and a lack of a record. Meanwhile, Collins says that it is not only his proven record, but experience that is what's going to be needed in order to win in this primary and then, of course, beat Jon Ossoff. A lot of interesting races happening here. We will see what it means to have the Trump endorsement as we look ahead to this runoff, and also what that means for those who have a bit more runway, so to speak, in Keisha Lance Bottoms and Jon Ossoff, and how that could potentially be advantageous for them as we look ahead to November. Back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Skylar. Crews battle wildfires burning thousands of acres in Southern California. These views are from the Sandy and Bane fires near Los Angeles. But this CAL FIRE map gives you a much better idea of the fires in Simi Valley west of LA, and the Bane fire is east of that in Riverside County. CBS News Los Angeles' Tina Patel and Rick Montanez show you the firefight from the ground.
Well, there has been very little wind this morning. Firefighters taking advantage of that. They've got their helicopters in the air doing water drops. And you can see this pink hillside behind me. That's from one of the retardant drops that they did here. The effort has paid off. Right now, no new reports of any homes being damaged or destroyed.
So I can tell you the conditions are looking dramatically better than they were yesterday. But you could see behind us here all that scorched earth as well as all the smoke that is in the air. I know we've been talking about that in the forecast this morning about the health effects of all that smoke, and you can see it just blanketing the area.
All right, we continue watching this podium in Miami, where after the announcement came out that former Cuban President Raúl Castro faces a U.S. indictment, there were cheers. As soon as somebody steps to that podium, we'll bring it to you right here on CBS News 24/7.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gayle King. Hey!
CBS Mornings. CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount Plus. See you at 7. CBS Mornings. CBS Mornings.
What she said.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
A woman is run off the road.
He just hit my car.
And calls 911.
He is there to kill her.
Surveillance camera images help identify her killer.
He appears in a hurry. He was hunting that night.
Absolutely.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed?
Former Cuban President Raúl Castro indicted. Let's go ahead and listen in Miami.
Resilience and enduring hope for those who came to America seeking liberty after fleeing a tyranny and oppression in Cuba. So many of our parents, our uncles and aunts, walked through these doors, 400,000 of them, looking for hope and opportunity. Today is their day. For generations of Cuban exiles, this building became more than a processing center. It became a symbol that freedom was still possible, a symbol that democracy, human dignity, and human rights matter. Today, we remember the 4 brave men of the Brothers to the Rescue, whose lives were taken on February 24th, 1996. not in war, but during a humanitarian mission rooted in compassion and in courage. Their sacrifice became a painful reminder to the world of the brutality of the Cuban regime and the high price so many have paid for speaking freely, defending democracy, and standing for human rights. We also recognize the countless victims who have suffered under the Cuban regime across generations, prisoners, families separated by exile, those silenced for dissonance, and all who have endured persecution, all in the pursuit of freedom and dignity. Their stories, our stories, are part of the larger story of Cuba, but also the part of the story of Miami and this Freedom Tower itself. As we gather today, may we honor the memory of those not only with reflection, but with renewed commitment to truth, to justice, and to the preservation.
All right, so
of the
just the first of what's going to be
values
several comments there at Freedom Tower in Miami. As soon as Acting U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche, who you see standing there, comes to the podium, we'll bring that to you. But we have an opportunity to go live right now to Capitol Hill, and somebody who has constituents in Florida who today consider this a glorious day. Florida Republican Congresswoman Maria Salazar, thank you so much for joining us today. You wrote on social media this morning using that term. Today is a glorious day, not only for Cubans on the island, but for every Cuban in exile, for every separated family, for every neighbor, every friend, and every loved one who has spent their life waiting for the day to return home. So I have to ask you, as somebody who's the daughter of Cuban immigrants, what does this mean to you?
Well, I mean, there are no words to describe the joy, and I'm only speaking on behalf of Florida number 27, which I was just telling you that press conference is happening in the heart of my district. I represent those people in the United States Congress. We're here because there are votes, otherwise we would be there sharing the news. But in reality is that this is a glorious day for the Cuban people and for the American people. Why do I say that? Because a free Cuba, a democratic Cuba, is part of the America First agenda that the president put forward when he won the presidency. He said it, the Western Hemisphere is important, and Cuba is the epicenter of evil, of terror in this Western Hemisphere. Without Cuba, Venezuela would have not existed. Nicaragua would not be there. So there are no words to describe.
Congresswoman, stay there with us. We're going to listen in to Acting U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche, and we might just come back to you. Stay right there. Let's listen together.
Mr. Castro and the others are charged with additional crimes as well, including destruction of aircraft and 4 individual counts of murder. The indictment was returned by a grand jury sitting in this district in Miami on April 23rd, 2026, and was unsealed today. For nearly 30 years, the families of 4 murdered Americans have waited for justice. On February, this is a story all too familiar. On February 24th, 1996, 2 civilian aircraft operated by Brothers to the Rescue were shot down over international waters by military aircraft from Cuba. 4 men were killed: Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandro Jr., Mario de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. They were unarmed civilians and were flying humanitarian missions for the rescue and protection of people fleeing oppression across the Florida Straits. As alleged in the indictment, Raúl Castro and 5 co-defendants participated in a conspiracy that ended with Cuban military aircraft firing missiles at those civilian planes and killing 4 Americans. Those are the allegations returned by a federal grand jury. My message today is clear. The United States and President Trump does not and will not forget its citizens. I want to say that we also do not forget the families, the loved ones, and the friends who have carried grief and heartache for 30 years. For the first time in nearly 70 years, senior leadership of the Cuban regime has been charged in this country, in the United States of America, for acts of violence resulting in the deaths of American citizens. Nations and their leaders cannot be permitted to target Americans, kill them, and not face accountability. President Trump is committed to restoring a very simple but important principle. If you kill Americans, we will pursue you, no matter who you are, no matter what title you hold, and in this case, no matter how much time has passed. I want to thank, and everybody in this room should thank, the FBI, the prosecutors, and the agents who worked on this matter. It includes the intelligence community and our federal and state law enforcement partners. They did the work here, so thank you. There's a reason why myself and the senator and other leadership are here and not in Washington, D.C. to announce this indictment. The community here, you all, understands the history of the Cuban regime better than anyone in America. Many families here know the cost of oppression. I've heard stories over the past week and past months, every one of them heartbreaking. They know that the pain caused by the regime did not stop at the island's shores. And today's indictment, while it does not bring back the murdered victims, it makes a statement. The United States government has not forgotten these innocent men who were shot out of the sky. And as in every criminal case, the defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty by a jury of their peers. But today, the Department of Justice has taken an important step and brought this indictment. I'm proud to stand here on this podium with U.S. Attorney Jason Redding Quinones to my right, Chris Rea, Deputy Director of the FBI. You're gonna get to clap. You're gonna get to clap for Jason in 20 seconds. Chris Rea, Deputy Director of the FBI, and James Utheimer, the Attorney General of this great state. And your great U.S. Senator is here as well. She's very busy in D.C., but wouldn't miss this for the world. So thank you for being here, Senator Moody. So I want to thank Jason for his leadership down here in Florida. He's doing a great job beyond today, and I'd also ask him to replace me at the podium to say a few words. So thank you, Jason, very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. It may sound a little repetitive, some of the things we're saying, but they're worthy of saying twice, 3 times, 100 times. So bear with us. For nearly 70 years, the communist Cuban regime has acted with impunity in its systematic repression of its people. And for the last 30 years, this regime's senior leadership has gone unchallenged for its murder of 4 Americans. Today, the United States announces a historic indictment charging Raul Castro and 5 co-defendants for their roles in the February 24th, 1996 shoot-down of 2 brothers to the rescue. A Miami grand jury has charged these defendants with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals, destruction of aircraft, and 4 counts of murder. The victims were 4 unarmed civilian pilots engaged in humanitarian work: Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandre Jr., Mario de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. They were not combatants, they were not armed, and they posed no threat. According to the indictment, Raul Castro, then Minister of the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces, authorized and oversaw a military chain of command that ended with Cuban fighter jets firing air-to-air missiles at civilian aircraft over international waters. Those missiles destroyed the planes without warning and killed all aboard. For 30 years, the families have waited. The Miami community has waited, and our country has waited. Today is a step towards accountability. This is the first time in almost 70 years that a senior leadership of the Cuban regime has been charged in the United States for acts of violence resulting in the death of Americans. The passage of time does not erase murder. It does not diminish the value of those lives, and it does not weaken our commitment to the rule of law. Standing here in the Freedom Tower gives this moment added meaning. This is the Ellis Island for Cuban refugees. It was the main processing center for countless exiles who fled communist Cuba with the hopes of reaching the American dream. My own mother spent her first night in the United States in this very building. After fleeing brutal communist Cuba, like so many families in Miami, mine understands what it means to arrive here with little more than hope and a chance to rebuild under the protection of American law. That history reminds me of the duty we carry, a duty to seek justice for victims, a duty to stand with families who have carried this pain for decades, and a duty to make it clear that those who kill Americans cannot simply wait out American justice. Today's date, May 20th, also carries deep meaning for the Cuban people. It is their 4th of July. It marks Cuba's independence from colonial Spain. It reminds us that the pursuit of freedom, dignity, and accountability spans generations and still lives alive and well in the heart of the Cuban community. Today's indictment is one part of that long effort. When I came into office in August of last year, I made reviving this case a priority. And I want to thank the team that made it happen. My first assistant, U.S. Attorney Yara Lorenzo Calucas. And my assistant United States Attorneys, Abby Waxman and Mike Guilfard. In conjunction with FBI Miami's Cuban squad, which we're not going to name or show their faces, for their commitment and drive to seeing this case through. It's incredible work. I also want to thank Mr. Attorney General for his incredible support and steady leadership of the department. And before I conclude, I also want to acknowledge the assistance of Florida Attorney General's office. Attorney General James Upmeyer and his team have been strong partners in this effort. Their support reflects the best of federal and state law enforcement working together in service of justice. With that, I turn the podium over to FBI's Deputy Director, Chris Rea. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I specifically want to thank the Attorney General and, of course, the U.S. Attorney here for allowing me to speak to you all today. And I also want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to showcase the small part that the FBI played. As was stated, today marks a significant moment in a long, long journey for justice. A journey that began 30 years ago with an unprovoked attack on American lives. 4 humanitarians were on a noble mission to help those fleeing oppression. Instead, their lives were violently taken in a reckless act by the Cuban regime. The FBI, the Department of Justice, and countless others never forgot them, and we never stopped hunting for the truth. Today's announcement shows that if it's 5 months, 5 years, 5 decades, we will keep pursuing you, and we'll keep pursuing anyone who intends to harm our citizens, and they will face American justice. I'd like to thank our dedicated special agents, our dedicated prosecutors, our dedicated intelligence analysts, and our dedicated professional staff, as well as our counterintelligence program, for never giving up. Enormous credit is due to the many teams across the 16 different FBI cases regarding this matter. The teams who have worked to hold members of the Cuban government's WASP network accountable. Our people have systematically and relentlessly searched for evidence, conducted countless interviews, and pieced together critical intelligence for nearly 3 decades. They turned dead ends into fresh leads. And over the years, that hard work has paid off with convictions of multiple operatives for activities related to that vicious shootdown. The charges we announced today are only the latest milestone on that road to justice, a road paved with persistence, partnership, and extreme resolve. To anyone who spies on our country or harms our citizens, know this: the FBI, the Department of Justice, has a long memory. We will come after you, and we will find you. As I close, I'd like to close with a personal anecdote, as this is deeply personal to me. You see, I was a former member of the United States Coast Guard right here in Miami Beach in Key West, Florida in the 1990s. I conducted numerous humanitarian missions with my fellow Coast Guardsmen, rescuing Cuban citizens who were just trying to find a better life. I also was fortunate enough to act as security during remembrance ceremonies held at the 12 nautical mile limit just outside of Cuban territorial waters. I served on Coast Guard cutters that provided the security to the friends and family who were just trying to remember their lost loved ones. So for me, today brings everything full circle. So in that vein, we dedicate all 3 decades of casework to the memories of the loved ones lost that day. To the victims' families and friends, we stand with you as we hold those responsibilities to account. Now, I'm going to turn it over to the U.S. Senator of this great state, Senator Moody. Thank you.
What a day. What a day. 3 months ago, I joined you on the anniversary to mark the killing of Carlos, Armando, Mario, Pablo, and I said it was not a cold case. It was never a cold case. It was never a whodunit. We always knew who was responsible for the killing of those young men. That was 3 months ago. And I am so proud to join you today to say we're finally bringing justice to those families, and not just those families. Everyone sitting here today for the past 30 years who have kept this case hot, who have met with me as the Attorney General, who repeatedly met with law enforcement, who repeatedly met with leaders, so many who came together and kept that case hot, like those that are no longer with us, like Lincoln Diaz-Balart. He would be right here in the front row today. They kept it hot. And just 3 months later, we are standing here on this important day when Cuba became a free state, a free people, to say we are living up to bringing accountability to the Castros and the regime that stole that independence. That's what we're doing today. It's an honor to be here today with our acting Attorney General Todd Blanche as the indictment is unsealed against others, but particularly against Raul Castro for his role in the Brothers to the Rescue murders. This moment has been decades in the making, and I want to thank all of the lawyers who read over all of the trial transcripts, the weeks and weeks of trial transcripts that put back together every piece of evidence and waited for that last piece of evidence to come into view and into your possession, and never gave up. And never gave up. For so many Cuban families, they know you can never become complacent in defending liberty, in fighting for freedom. And Florida is the symbolism of fighting for freedom. We're in the beating heartbeat of that for this nation. So I thank you. Thank you for being here today and remembering what it's like to hold tyrants accountable. And it is why I applaud the Department of Justice for bringing these charges. You know, previous administrations, as those of you met with leadership, reminded them of 30 years ago what happened, previous administrations would release the one person we convicted related to it. Maybe even go down there and go to a baseball game. The last administration decided we were going to, I don't know, relax our banking restrictions or whatever. Maybe coddle them into freedom. But not this administration. They took the bold step of actually bringing accountability and understanding that accountability works. So we thank President Trump for recognizing that, for being brave and bringing justice for these 4 men, for their families, and indeed for freedom. And I want to tell you, when Governor DeSantis appointed me to be your newest United States Senator, he did so and said, I want you to take everything you know about this state, every person you've met with, everything you've learned, every battle you've fought to make Florida what it is, take that to Washington and let's get things done. And I am so proud to be here today to say we got things done. And so on today, May 20th, on the day that Cuba became a free and independent state, I would like to end my visit with you by reading the following. And it is a penalty sheet in the Southern District of Florida, United States District Court. advising that Raúl Castro will face count 1, conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals, facing a maximum term of imprisonment of life imprisonment. Counts 2 and 3, destruction of aircraft, facing a maximum term of imprisonment on each count of up to 5 years in prison. And counts 4 through 7, the charges of murder, facing a maximum term of imprisonment on each count of death or life imprisonment. God bless you. God bless this great free state of Florida and our United States of America.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here and support Attorney General Blanche, Senator Moody, and your group.
All right. Okay, so you have been watching continuing coverage on this day when the Department of Justice announces Raul Castro's indictment connected to the 1996 downing of planes. Jake Rosen joining us from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Jake, a couple of questions that I have. One of those is what's next in this process here? This is an indictment, yes, but now does Raul Castro come maybe
individual personal property rights, suffocates merit, and centralizes total power in the hands of tyrants. We've seen what communism has brought us. Over 100 million people that have lost their lives, engineered famines, and the total destruction of human liberty. Just 90 miles from our Florida shorelines, the Castro family has ruled the island with an iron fist. For nearly 50 years, Raúl Castro directed the armed forces and served as chief enforcer. The very man who traded the promise of revolution for a prison state. And under his command, and to this day, Cuba remains a dungeon. Political dissidents are ripped from their homes at night under fabricated charges. They're dragged through the streets, beaten, and imprisoned for decades. I know this pain is all too real for many of you in this room. The people have long suffered because of that communist regime. And today that hits very close to home here in the Freedom Tower with the brothers to the rescue. Raúl Castro ordered those fighter jets to shoot down unarmed civilian aircraft. It was not an accident. It was intentional, premeditated, state-sanctioned murder. And their criminal conspiracy violated Florida's sovereignty. They embedded spies here in Miami and across jurisdictions down into the Florida Keys, revealing the intelligence that would put these civilian aircraft in the crosshairs. And yet for too long, leaders in Washington looked the other way. They sat by idly. They even attended baseball games with the very man that directed the murders. Not anymore. We're blessed to have a president, Donald J. Trump, we are blessed to have a president in Donald J. Trump who will not bend the knee for communist tyrants. And we are blessed to have Attorney General Blanche and your United States Attorney that advance justice and rule of law and who are not going to politically weaponize government. It's an honor to support them in this endeavor. Last year, right after I took office, I directed our prosecutors to reopen the investigation into the Castros and these murders. Working hand in hand with the U.S. Attorney and supporting his team, we are today one step closer to advancing justice. And the cooperation between the United States and state of Florida could not be more critical than today. Americans deserve justice. Floridians deserve justice. The family members of these men that lost their lives, they deserve justice. Now, going forward, let me be crystal clear. There can be no future for a free Cuba so long as the Castros and their criminal gang of thugs remain in power. We now have the leaders that will pursue that which is right and just. That I know. So get ready. There's more to come. God bless America, and God bless the free state of Florida.
So we're going to just take a couple questions, although the questions should be directed to the reason why we're here today and not something else. So are there other reporters? And Pierre.
Attorney General Blanche, key question, why now? Was there a breakthrough in this case? Can you speak to the evidence that leads you to believe that Raul Castro directly participated in the deaths of those Americans who were killed? And I have a follow-up.
Well, I cannot explain or justify why now as opposed to 2 decades ago or 30 years ago when it happened. But what I can say is that you just heard a lot of people talk about a ton of work that the FBI did, state and local intelligence communities, our U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General's, the State Attorney General's team. And that evidence was presented to a grand jury in late April, and an indictment was returned. So I can't, as far as what the evidence is, well, a lot of it's in the indictment, and it would not be appropriate or fair to comment outside of the indictment about the evidence. But as you guys know, a grand jury is presented with evidence and then returns an indictment to the extent that they believe there's probable cause that a crime has been committed, which a grand jury certainly did here.
And quick follow-up, what are the prospects that you could get Raul Castro to the United States to face justice, given the situation there, and what steps are the U.S. willing to take to get him back here?
Well, we indict men outside of this country all the time, and there's all kinds of different ways that we get them here. The reason why we indict somebody is because we want them here to face justice in front of a jury of their peers. So. How we go about doing that obviously depends on the circumstances in the case, and I'm not going to go beyond that, but we expect that we didn't indict. This isn't a show indictment. This is an indictment because we expect that there was a warrant issued for his arrest. So we expect that he will show up here by his own will or by another way and go to prison. All right, next question. Yep, go ahead.
Are any others in the Castro family potentially tied up in this? Could there be other charges from members in the Castro family from the Castro regime?
Well, as you just heard, this is an indictment in some ways 30 years in the making. There is not a prosecutor in this room or an FBI agent in this room that ever stops investigating. So whether there will be additional charges, whether there are additional defendants charged, who knows? But an investigation like this is never over. And so I assure you the men and women who have been working tirelessly on this case for the past several months, years, are not just going to retire. So you just point to somebody.
Good afternoon. Many Cuban Americans are elated, emotional, hopeful on a day like today. What do you tell the Cuban community who is happy about today's announcement, but is wondering how you pursue these charges? What comes next?
I mean, that's the same question I just answered. I think that there's a process that happens, right? And so what's the first process? It's a charge, it's an indictment, and that happens all across this country constantly. And then the next question is, okay, so when is this guy going to show up and you know, appear in court and have a trial or what have you? And I would say to those that wonder whether this is just an indictment and we're going to go away, we're not. So go ahead. Yes, the blue shirt. Yeah. I'll go to the middle next.
Attorney General Blanche, we would like to know what would be the next step to, a lot of people are wondering if there will be any sort of attack, military response from the United States. If this now indictment gives permission for the United States to be closer to Cuba and, again, get Raúl Castro and those others implicated here to the United States.
So I'm the acting Attorney General of the Department of Justice. We bring charges. So the question you asked is a question that involves the Department, the President of the United States, the Secretary of War, the Secretary of State, and doesn't involve the acting Attorney General. So what I can tell you is that this is this indictment, as we've said a bunch of times today, is a result of a lot of hard work and what we believe is an important step in bringing some semblance of justice to the families and friends and loved ones of these men who were murdered. But beyond that, I'm not going to talk about what could happen with Cuba beyond that. Yes, go ahead.
Attorney General Gloria Ordaz from Telemundo 51. Thank you for this opportunity. The next step is going to be an arrest warrant, and I ask you this because the Cuban exile would love to see Raúl Castro in the same position of Nicolás Maduro. And a lot of legal experts that we have interviewed during these days have said that Raúl Castro, that this indictment will be more symbolic than practice, and that Raúl Castro should probably die in Cuba. What is your message for them?
Well, I'm not going to compare cases, for one. For two, like I said a few minutes ago, we indict men who are not physically within the United States all the time. This is not a new endeavor or adventure for us. And so the way that we get people here who are charged with a crime varies. There's all kinds of different ways. And this is not, you know, there's an arrest warrant issued for a reason, because we certainly expect and believe that Mr. Castro is entitled to his day in court right here in Miami. Sue, yep.
Thank you, sir. Jesse Kirsch with NBC News. You mentioned that the grand jury approved these charges weeks ago. Curious to know what, if any, role the CIA director's visit to Cuba in recent days played in deciding to move forward with announcing this indictment. And
I'm not going to get into why we decided to unseal the indictment today, except to note the place that we're standing and the important day that today represents. But yes, you're right. There's a lot of factors that go into when a sealed indictment is unsealed, if ever. And so beyond just the fact that, look, by the way, it wasn't that long ago. It was late April. It's mid-May. So.
Thank you. One other question. If people look at this and say this is at least partially just a pretext to push for regime change in Cuba, what would you say to people who take that perspective?
I don't care what people look at and think. I mean, we returned an indictment, and that's what we're here to talk about. If people want to speculate or think what they will, I don't care. Okay, one more question. Blue.
Hi, so the final speaker, thank you. Hi, I'm Deborah Acosta with the Wall Street Journal. The final speaker mentioned or hinted at a potential team of people that has been put together to lead the country. Who are those people? Are they in the United States? Are they in Cuba? Is it a mix of both? Can you share a little bit more about that team?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Can you say it again?
At the final speaker mentioned that there was a team of people that's going to lead this forward.
Huh?
Final speaker.
So why don't we let the final speaker address that?
And thank you for the new nickname.
Yeah, very good.
Will ever be known as the final speaker.
That's probably easier to pronounce than my last name, Uthmeyer, but I don't think I referenced what you're saying. Where I talked about people spread across the state, I was talking about the spies and the criminal conspiracy that the evidence has revealed took place. There were spies working from Miami all the way down to the Florida Keys, gathering intelligence and providing it to the regime to figure out where these aircraft were going to be and put them in harm's way. As far as other geopolitical things, I'm going to stay in my lane for now. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes the press conference on behalf of Miami-Dade College and the Freedom Tower. Thank you so much for being here, and you may go.
Good afternoon. I'm Lindsay Reiser. We have been listening to top Justice Department officials discuss today's unsealed indictment against Raúl Castro of Cuba, the former Cuban leader there, and 5 others being indicted by a U.S. grand jury in Florida in connection with the Cuban military's fatal downing of 2 planes 30 years ago. These planes belonged to humanitarian group Brothers to the Rescue, helping Cuban migrants in distress. This is part of the Trump administration's pressure campaign against Cuba, Castro remaining one of the most powerful figures at 94 years old in Cuba. And it's not clear whether he will stand trial. Cuba does not extradite to the U.S. We did hear Blanche, who was asked about that, the acting attorney general. And we will certainly be talking about that with CBS News correspondent Christian Benavides, who is in Miami now. Christian, what more are we learning about these charges and why now?
Lindsay, a lot of questions about why now, but I will just mention that for the Cuban American community, I mean, this is a moment that they've waited for 3 decades. I mean, they've waited even longer for some sort of regime change in Cuba, which is what they're all hoping for, that something such as this will eventually lead to. Importantly, within that indictment, 4 counts of murder and also conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals. Those 4 counts of murder, 3 U.S. citizens and 1 U.S. resident who were shot down on a humanitarian mission. They were on humanitarian planes, part of an organization known as Brothers to the Rescue. So what this organization would do is that they would fly over the Florida Straits and international waters, and they would help Cubans who often would be in distress as they made their way in rafts and whatever they could find from Cuba, seeking freedom to Florida. And so during one of these missions, what happened was that the Cuban regime shot down 2 planes. 1 plane was able to make it back to Florida. And now you probably can't hear. I just have to pause for a minute, but I'm starting to hear just some chanting from from the small crowd that has gathered in front of the Freedom Tower, chanting USA, USA, and down with Cuba and the Cuban government. Back to this indictment, I mean, what it means to Cuban Americans here in South Florida that have waited for this moment for so long is just difficult to put into words. I spoke to Jose Basulto. As I mentioned, there were 3 planes that went on that mission from Brothers to the Rescue. 2 of them were shot down with those 4 people killed under orders of Raúl Castro. 1 of those planes did make it back, and Jose, who we spoke to, was in that plane. Let's take a listen.
At one point, I saw to the right of my plane a big black cloud, meaning that was one of my brothers that has been taken down.
Do you ever think back about that day?
No.
Why not?
Because it's painful.
Do you want Raúl Castro to be brought here to Miami to face justice?
I hope he's made to come here to the U.S. to be indicted and receive justice.
and that is the hope of so many who live here from the Cuban exile community, that Raul Castro would be brought to face justice here in Miami, where a grand jury has returned this indictment. Now, will that actually happen? That is a major, major question. Would the U.S. government go in a similar way that they did to Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela? That is unclear. We do not know if they would do that, but certainly it gives the U.S. an opportunity to enact pressure on a regime that the U.S. government has already said they want to change.
And you're talking about some of the reaction you're hearing outside. Inside, we also heard a ton of reaction. It was a very unusual setting for something like this. Usually there's not sort of this crowd of people who are cheering. Do we know who was in attendance there for that press conference?
Well, right, you really had a who's who of Cuban-American politicians and leaders and commissioners, and really across the political spectrum. The Miami-Dade County mayor, who is a Democrat, was in there. Eileen Higgins, who is a Democrat here in Miami, was also in there. And a number of elected officials on the GOP side. Really, here in South Florida, what happens with Cuban politics just transcends politics, even though it has so much meaning and gives so much advantage to the GOP here in South Florida. When you talk to politicians who represent certain districts, it is clear that they are for the freedom of Cuba. And for Cuban Americans, this is just so meaningful. I keep hearing in the background, it may be difficult to hear on your end, but I just keep hearing in the background that small crowd that has gathered in front of the Freedom Tower. And what a symbolic moment on Cuba's Independence Day, May 20th, at the Freedom Tower, which is known as the Ellis Island of the South, where so many Cuban refugees were processed. This was perhaps the first place that they slept, the first place that they had a taste of freedom was here at the Freedom Tower. And now to have this indictment be announced here, I mean, it could have been in so many other places. You could have had the indictment be announced in D.C. You could have had this be announced at the district attorney's office here, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, excuse me, here in South Florida. But to have it at the Freedom Tower, to have the audience that you had, people who were members of Brothers to the Rescue, who risked their lives to help those Cubans who were escaping from this brutal and authoritarian regime in search for freedom. That's why you heard all that cheering that was going on in there. And that's why off in the distance, that small crowd that has gathered here in front of the Freedom Tower has been cheering.
Okay, Christian Benavides, thank you so much. We are going to take a quick break. You're watching CBS News 24/7.